So do we agree that this is something? Yes, we can start from that.
Agreed.
And that's
so that dialogue would have what we might call concessions. I can see that I can see. In fact, we've taken the Galilean dialogue on concerning two systems, where it talks about the body
which uses
and we use exactly that example to illustrate this formalism. And what you just pointed out is what we're kind of actually those concessions effectively give you certain preferences. So if you say we haven't explicitly modelled it at this level, but we will model it when we generalise this to a dialogical setting, right, where you can have speech acts like concede. At the moment, we're just looking at submission of arguments. This can be generalised to a dialogical setting. And if I say, well, okay, this is premise P, and you say concede P, what we're looking at is that concession effectively means that premise P has a maximal ordering.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how we
refer over all other.
because you both agree on it. Yeah, and actually that's another way to get illicit preferences.
I mean, I actually just still thinking about about this preference ordering. In your ontology, you still have it.
Yeah.
And how do you define it imposed externally somehow?
Yes.
Is it or is it? Sorry, how's it usually defined?
It's usually okay. So you would take a set delta of the classical formula, and you would have a given partial ordering over the premises. It's given. You just assume it's there, and then from that you lift it to an ordering over the argument. But I think,
But what is the purpose of it? So is the purpose of it given a certain set of arguments to select, to choose?
Yeah.
Is it so? Usually in economical theory, for example, in theory of choice, preference relation is something that you need to take the optimal element from a set, what you preferred. So how would you then define preferred element? Is it as a greatest element or as a maximal element? So if
I'm not sure I understand, because here we're just talking about pairwise preferences between arguments. So we just look and see, well, how do these two arguments compare each other given the underlying, given the preference relation?
So if they're not comparable, how do you choose them?
You can't.
What is preferred? If
You can't.
So you don't prefer.
No. So for example, if I have if A and B attack each other, and I have no preference relation, I get two extensions. Two sets of defendable arguments, one containing A, one containing B. No argument is an ornament, so no argument is skeptically justified, and so I can do nothing. It's a dilemma that cannot be resolved.
So even in the finite set of arguments, there are situations where you cannot make a choice.
Yeah, exactly. Where you have multiple extensions.
Because actually, it's quite the opposite. In the choice theory, the idea is that you must be able to choose an element at least from a finite set. So if it's an infinite set, it may not have the
But not
it's finite. And from that you can prove that it's total. And then from every pair you must be able to choose.
Well, no, we're not in this case.
Okay. Okay, so that's.
And some of these priorities come from, sometimes you have rules that are prioritized above other rules, like penguins don't fly is prioritized above birds fly because penguins are a special subclass of birds. Or you could think of epistemic entrenchment orderings and belief revision. That's what gives you an ordering over the premises. So, but I actually think, and I think that's work I've not talked about here, but in previous work, I always allow you to reason about preferences which can be contradictory. So you've got conflicting arguments for opposing preference orderings, and then you can reason above and say, well, this preference is preferred to this preference, and so on and so on.
So in that sense, there's a little confusion of terminology, because of course then there is a preference relations, special class of relations.
From a kind of non-Martonic reasoning, belief revision perspective.
Okay.
But I claim a prize to be the first person to say Hegel.
Sorry?
I claim a prize to be the first person to say Hegel.
Hegel, okay.
Why does synthesis come in?
I know. This is something actually I'm working also with someone else. That this doesn't really model dialectic in the Hegelian sense. Agreed. I mean,
it almost did when you said that A and B was contradictory. Now you've got two.
So the example is
synthesis, right?
It's not well, it's not touched it.
No, but okay. So I'm working with someone else on this, but the idea would be this: supposing I have an argument, a simple argument for birds fly, right? And then I have an argument that says, well, Tweety is a penguin, doesn't fly, it attacks. The idea would be to change the rule birds fly to birds and negation penguin flies. And so what I'm looking at with another researcher is how do you model the evolution of knowledge based upon the conflicts that arise in an argument framework? And that would give you a kind of Hegelian, more of a Hegelian flavour. Beginnings of it.
Because sometimes you can't do it by special casing. You have to say, well, collapse that and start it.
And in fact, Ted Bundy was also looking at something a little similar. He's called the Reformation. You know Ted Bundy in Edinburgh?
It's on.
Ted Bundy, Alan Bundy.
Alan Bundy, sorry. Alan
So,
Bundy.
we can discuss who Ted Bundy is as well.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Isn't Ted Bundy was a serial killer? Oh, God. So the serial killer has been whiling his away his hours in prison, working on no,
So I was looking at dialectic. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
There was something. There was something you mentioned about topology as well. So obviously, there is something called specialization pre-order or specialization ordering. Is that how you construct topology? Because you mentioned something about counting and then.
That's work with Davide Grossi, where the basic idea is that if I have, so supposing I have this argument here, attacked by here, this argument. So we've got x, y, z. This is a certain it's justified because it's reinstated. But it's more justified if I have another argument. We have what's called graded semantics. So we can say, well, in this case, argument x is more justified given it has two reinstators.
More than what?
Then in that case. So that's effectively accounting for the topology of the graph to give a more fine-grained graded.
Topology in that sense. Okay.
In that sense, well, I know it's an abuse.
Which would be the same, I mean, that case also implies that an argument which is not attacked is more justified than an argument which has an attacker, which in turn has an attacker.
Yeah, now this is where we get to really difficult things.
Yeah.
We have started with conflicting intuitions.
Yeah.
I started with the intuition, well, the fact that an argument has been attacked many times and defended suggests that it's kind of withstood. It's just like in scientific, in the kind of Popperian idea of evolution of scientific theory. But actually, this model is slightly different. The intuition is different in this case. And we had a bit of a we acknowledge that we would like to also model that kind of grading notion of the status of arguments. Yeah.
See, very possibly you already covered this, and I apologise I came in late, but I guess argumentation generally has an intuitionistic element amongst human individuals. Are there intuitionistic extensions of the methodology you were outlining?
No.
Necessarily not, because you have the P-not-P branching. Yeah.
But remember, that's just one particular. I mean, you could define an argumentation formalism instantiated by intuitionistic logic. Because the example I showed you there was just one example of how you might construct. You can do it with many logics, construct the arguments and the relations between them and other logics.
Can you go to your slide which claimed to be about classical logic?
Which
so in its title it says something about classical logic. And then
do you remember which one was it about? What was it saying?
At the beginning?
At the beginning.
Yeah.
No, so it can't be here, so let's go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so at the condition 3, why is this classical?
No, we also, by the way, I didn't talk about that, we also dropped that condition. It's also incompatible with dialectical practice. You don't look at your premise and say, now, can I from that set of premises find a smaller subset that entails alpha? No, but we dropped that.
It is rather linear.
Yeah. I mean, the thing with that is to prevent irrelevant arguments that make use of irrelevant premises.
Yeah, so that's so gamma would be the minimally consistent set that entails alpha, right?
Otherwise, you would have you take delta, the whole delta with p, y, s, a1 to an.
Then you can start adding.
And you have an argument for an, and you got included a1 to a. Now we don't like that because that's not consistent with dialectical practice. And in the version I do with Marcello, the interlink, we give proofs that satisfy the weak subformula problem. So this is for relevance. Right? It's to ensure that the premises are relevant. What we do is we drop subset minimality, but we have a proof system that satisfies a weak subformula property. That means that every formula is a weak subformula of the previous formula. That there is this, so you always make sure that there is syntactic relatedness between in every proof step. It gives you back some notion of relevance, but this is also something we drop.
Do you know dialogue categories?
Like liberation, persuasion, negotiation.
Yeah, they generalize a model for linear logic. But if you don't know,
No, I don't know. Dialogue categories.
yeah,
In the sense of category theory.
yes. So a model of linear logic is some monoidal adjunction, and the dialogue category is more general. I don't know if it is related to what we are doing.
I've not heard of it.
But certainly, as I mentioned before, maybe resource boundedness can be handled with linear logic.
Maybe.
No? Okay.
That horrible hanging.
Yeah, you need that. Otherwise, then you're essentially sort of using affine logic or something like that, which is not good enough.
David Pym would say bunch projects.
Sorry?
David Pym would say bunch projects.
Okay.
Better account of resource.
Okay. Okay, so I think we can thank Sanjay again.
Yeah.
Thank you. You've been very generous with your time, because I realise it's been an hour and a quarter. Normally I don't.
But we have the rules booked until 4.
Oh, right.
So we
Yeah.
usually
Then I
have...
told you.
So now it's down to the hard question.
No, because normally I sort of have to try and rush and finish in 50 minutes, and then, and I knew there was a lot to get through to get the background, and then the problems, and then the solution.
We are more relaxed.
we usually want to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nice. I appreciate it. Or you probably don't have enough to teach, right? So you've got no.
But someone had to leave.
Yeah, but those that left typically are those. Until last week, I was always leaving at 3.
Me too.
And now,
Okay.
Thank you.